I'd like to introduce Mr. Aubrey Stevens, who is a historian and knows a great deal about Canvey Island. Mr. Stevens, your family has been living on Canvey Island for quite some time.
Yes, I came here when I was 5. That was in 1921. My father started a baker's business in 1923, which is still being carried on by my son.
When was it that the population of the island saw the great increase?
Directly after the First World War. When we came here it was under 2,000 and today it is 35,000. It increased very rapidly. It had increased, well, it's increased over the years about 1,000 a year, I think, nearly.
Yes. What were the occupations of the earlier residents?
Well, it was a seaside resort, built as a seaside resort, so the occupation, there was no industry, was a service industry that looked after the local people like any other district. People were building these bungalows. There were a lot of unemployed wherever you went in the 30s, that's the period we're thinking about. So, and there were people that commuted. I don't quite know when Dagenham, places like Dagenham, Forge at Dagenham started, but from then onwards, a lot of people have been moving out of the east end of London, moving into South East Essex, and a lot of them came to Canvey.
Yes, I see. I suppose before the bridge was built, moving house onto Canvey must have been a bit awkward.
It was frightfully awkward because not only had they the ferry to contend with, they had all unmade roads, and people, even if they got across, they found the tide was right and got their vehicle across the island. The removal van when they came to Canvey was so upset they often dumped the person's goods at the top of our present high road, went off, and the poor newcomers onto the island had to hump the stuff probably from the edge of the road to their new residence across the unmade road, probably thick with mud.
Oh goodness. Shortly after the war, in 1953, there were the floods that I think all of us have heard about.
Quite. Yes, it's when Canvey really hit the headlines. The interesting thing was that there was a lot of damage, but Canvey, again, being an island, because they said they had wanted to evacuate the whole population, we didn't all go for very long, but because of the animals, and it was Canvey was pinpointed. You don't move 16,000 people without a lot of disturbance, whereas some streets like in Harwich was bad damage, worse damage, but the folk moved into the town where it wasn't damaged, and then you couldn't see them. But this went on for days, so the press had a glorious time covering every aspect of it.
Was it as great a tragedy as the press would have us believe?
Oh yes, I think it was. I mean, we lost more lives in that night than we lost from people going to the war. 60 odd people died, and a lot of old people never put an end to their lives. They died shortly afterwards, we don't know. Oh yes, there's no doubt about it. It was.
Yes, a great tragedy. And of course a lot of the homes were bungalows, weren't they?
Mostly bungalows. So that was one of the big problems. Now, if we had anything happen like this, though we've got a lot of single bungalows, in every street there are houses, and people would be perfectly safe in their upstairs rooms.
Yes, yes. What do you think attracts people to Canvey? Why do they come here?
That's a very, very difficult question. Why do people move to any area? Well, first of all, I think for people like so many of these folk here who've set up home in the last 20 years, they've been young couples, things, as you well know, in the last 20 years I think housing has always been a problem. Canvey, because the land was cheap, because the buildings were built by individual builders, they were a lot cheaper, and a lot of them came here to start their first homes.
You obviously find it a very pleasant place to be.
Well, my roots are here, as I said, and now I'm of an age when I can tell folks like you about the history of Canvey. It perhaps seems to be a bit more interesting than some old people when you go and listen to them. They tell you the same old story week after week. I think we can sort of, with our material, show you something different than what a lot of old folk can do when they start nattering about the past.
How do you feel about the future? How do you see the future of Canvey developing?
Well, the future. Obviously we are purely a residential area, a dormitory area. I would feel that this will always be an interesting place. The properties are going to be interesting because they've been, even the new properties, all individually built, very few estates. And people will... I wonder what's going to happen for the next generation. I doubt whether there'll be the housing, they will move off. But I think we'll become one of these places where there's a lot of senior citizens with a terrific lot of social life.
You've seen a number of changes. That's just one of them, isn't it?
Yes, I'm sure we have seen some changes. I told you in the first place when we said that when I came first to Canvey I couldn't go to school, because there was only a place in the village for 60 children. Shortly after that they did build a school, and that was for only 200. And now, of course, I've got a little junior school down the road there, Liebeck Junior School and Primary. That's got 1,200 children just to cope with this catchment area. Three comprehensive schools against our one village church school for 60 children. What more can you say than that?
Oh, goodness, yes.